Hey. Book after about social interactions. Certain okay. Okay, I think I've sort of solved the issues now. Hopefully there are still people with me. Let me know if you can or can't hear me now. I'm very, very sorry for the issues. Okay, so hopefully that means you can hear me. Good, you can. Great. Welcome. So we have Giordano. Oh, perfect. We have Michelle joining us now as well. Okay. I know Michelle and I have both had issues with technology today, but
Yes, we have. Hello,
we're both with you now.
everyone.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry for turning up late, but my laptop was not cooperating.
don't
But I'm
worry.
here now. Yes.
Yes, and my audio issues are resolved now as well. So perfect timing. Hi to Martina, to Vincenzo, Alessandro, and Giordano, our Director of Studies as well. Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our focus 10 to 13.
Yeah. So I think I started to explain this to myself, as it turns out. Um, so what is nature versus nurture? So what
Mm.
kind of debate is this?
That's an interesting question. So I think generally we have this argument in psychology,
Mm-hmm.
nature versus nurture. The question is that nature refers to your biological or genetic predispositions. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the color of your eyes or the color of your skin, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
nature. And then nurture describes the influence of your environment, of the culture you grew up in, the people who surround you. What do you learn? What do you pick up from there? And
Yes.
I believe the argument is how much of our personality is nature, meaning how much is something that has been genetically programmed into us, and how much of it is things we pick up from things we learn from our
Mm-hmm.
environment. And Em and I have both done A-level psychology, so obviously we're
Yes.
experts.
Of course we are. Of course we are. Yeah. And I just want to mention the word nurture as well, because this is a verb that you can use in a way to mean to care for something. So if you nurture a passion, it means that you look after it, you let it grow, which is quite a nice word, I think.
Hmm.
So this gives us the opportunity to talk about upbringing in general, how you grow up, how you were raised, and some phrasal verbs. We have a lot of phrasal verbs related to learning and growing.
You used an interesting word there, upbringing,
Mhm.
right? How would you describe that?
Yeah, so upbringing, I would say, is about how you were raised,
Hmm.
how your parents or other people in your life as a child looked after you and taught you things.
Fantastic. And you could say upbring. Could we say that?
Not quite. So this has a connected phrasal verb
Hmm.
to bring up.
To bring up. Fantastic.
Yeah, you get this strange inversion for the noun where we get upbringing.
Sorry, have you put the slides up? Because I can just see a
Ah,
black screen.
I have. I will open it again just in case there is a problem.
Fantastic.
So, okay, that's nothing.
Okay, let me try putting it up.
Okay, I think this may be a YouTube problem. Um, so I know they have a lot of traffic at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. Um,
Okay, can you see it?
I can see it. Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
perfect. Would you like to read them?
Sure. So, in this focus activity, they said we'll talk about your upbringing, about how you were raised, and some phrasal verbs related to learning.
Fantastic. Okay, nature versus nature. Nurture.
And nature versus nature, maybe. I think Michelle is frozen for the moment. I'm sure she'll return to us. So, what is the nature versus nurture debate? What are the differences between the two schools of thought, and when did this debate first arise? Okay, so please tell us what you think for any of these questions. Okay, so we talked a little about the first one. So what is this debate? Okay, sorry guys. Well, I'll share the screen again. I think she has been disconnected. So we sorry. I have too many screens open. So yeah, so we talked about the debate being about um, what's more important, your learning, your upbringing, or is it um, about something that happens to you naturally, about your genetics? So the difference is maybe it's about what kind of teaching that if what kind of education you receive when you're a child, because maybe if people believe in nature more, they will have a very minimal education, something that wants to immerse you in something. Think about languages. You know, if you believe that you have a natural capacity for languages, you have a natural ability, then maybe you just need opportunities to speak. You don't need grammar instruction. Some people believe that you naturally are aware of language structures, of grammar. Maybe let me know what you think about that, because it's a very disputed argument. People are really disagree on this. Whereas if you believe in nurture, then maybe you think that it's more important to teach people the basics, to teach people about grammar and things. Bruno, welcome. So, Bruno, I think that nurture depends, remember the S there, on how we were educated. Okay, yeah, if you have a good education, a good upbringing, maybe you are more likely to reach your full potential. Maybe that's that's a good point. Maybe you can use natural talent if people encourage you to in education. That's a good point. And Martina, I think that nature is an objective topic and nurture, so we don't need the there because it's very abstract. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, I'm back.
Nurture is a subjective topic. Don't worry, it happens. We have an interesting comment from Martina here that I was just talking about.
Hmm.
So, Martina, in what way is nature objective? Because I think I agree that nurture is subjective. Maybe it because everyone's upbringing, everyone's education is very different.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure I feel that nature is objective. What do you think, Michelle?
Maybe you mean it's just has an objective reality,
Hmm.
right? Maybe she means it like that. But I think, Martina, you should talk to us and tell us, what do you
Mhm.
mean by that?
Yeah, please do.
Because that is an interesting comment, and I would love to have
Mhm.
a discussion on what Martina thinks.
Yeah, absolutely. As I introduced the idea of the way that you learn a language as well being
Mm-hmm.
elements to this discussion. What other areas is this debate common in? What other topics?
Mm, I think one area would be obviously in how you raise children. I think that's the
Hmm.
most obvious situation.
Hmm.
Um, Also, I know a lot of these experiments, when they were first being discussed, and as they've been discussed over the years, they've spoken about child development
Hmm.
and also about serial killers.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Mm.
Right, because they often wonder, are serial killers made or are serial killers born?
Hmm.
Right, that's a very interesting question. And I think pop psychology that we see in TV shows like Dexter, I think
Hmm.
that's a really great example of nature versus nurture, where the premise of the show is that he is born with these traits where he has this urge to kill people. But because he was raised in a very loving family, a very balanced family,
Yeah.
he found another outlet and he became a CSI, a criminal
Hmm.
investigator. And he would just only kill bad guys and,
Yeah.
freeze them or
Interesting.
cut them up and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Because I think also related to that, then it brings into question the idea of responsibility as well. Because if
Mm.
someone is naturally a certain way, if someone is naturally a serial killer, for example, then how does that relate to responsibility? Because you could argue that it's not their fault, it's not their
Hmm.
choice. Um, Although I think that is quite a weak argument, I would say, but it's there. It's definitely something to consider when you think about punishments and that kind of.
Mm. Absolutely. Bruno says something interesting. He has
Mm-hmm.
said that nature depends, remember, third person. So
Mm-hmm.
nature depends on the person's innate qualities. You don't need another preposition after on.
Yeah.
Um, yes, but the question I think would arise, what do you classify as innate qualities?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is
Yeah.
patience an innate quality, or is patience something that you learn through
Mm-hmm.
experiences?
Yeah. And some things begin so early that it's difficult to know because you can't
Mm,
point to one experience and say, this taught me patience. This is how
true.
I learned this. So it's a very interesting question. So I
Mm-hmm.
think Bruno, maybe you believe in certain innate qualities. So maybe tell us what you think some innate natural qualities are.
Right.
Monica, hi Monica. So the debate is based on the importance. So it's the noun, the importance of the upbringing that a person must receive. Okay, yeah. I for his her. I'm not sure what this word is at the end. Um, yeah, maybe I would say you can just say must receive and end
Mm-hmm.
there. Yeah, I think you're right, and this brings into question the idea of law and does is law based on this argument as well? The idea that people must do something or must receive something, maybe has a place in this discussion. So yeah, great comment. Just remember the noun there, the importance of the upbringing.
And the last topic says, when did it arise?
Hmm.
I believe it was Darwin, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because Darwin talking about evolution, the idea of genetics, and the
Mm-hmm.
that some things are natural, um, but then I think in the years after Darwin, people were also talking about education. They were talking about the way that we learn, either as children or as adults. So it was a way to draw those things together, to ask,
Mm-hmm.
are they the same or are they incompatible?
Yeah, good questions to ask in this time of reflection.
Yeah. Do you have any strong feelings about nature versus nurture, Michelle?
I mean, not particularly. I think that as humans, we do have something called free will.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can credit nature to a few things like the color of my skin, um, and maybe my curly hair. But I think a lot of development past a certain age has to be based on nurture. And it's not necessarily how you were brought up, but past the age of 25, I think you do have some responsibility towards yourself
Yeah.
to, if you are a self-aware individual, an insightful individual, you will be aware of certain deficiencies
Mm-hmm.
within yourself, and I think you do take action to correct those. For example, in my case, I have historically been short on patience, and it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I've learned to cultivate over the years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Em?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think um, you can believe in innate qualities, but it's I think it's quite healthy to recognize that you can learn things
Hmm.
um, later in life, or you can, as you say, you can hone a skill, you can improve a skill that you want. Um, I I think that sometimes we have predispositions in nature, some things that are more likely that we would do or be, but the actual choice or the actual practice is maybe more our choice. So, for example, I think in my family, there have been a lot of alcoholics or a lot of people who have had problems with addiction,
Hmm.
uh, and that does not mean that I will be an addict, and it doesn't mean that I will be an alcoholic, but it does mean that I am aware of that history, of that natural inclination, um, and you change the way that you nurture yourself, or you change the way you live your life.
Absolutely.
If anyone else has any other examples of this, let us know. Okay, Bruno says both nature and nurture depend on on the context in which we live. Yeah, I think nurture, in fact, is all about the context in which we live. Because we talk about education, that doesn't always mean school learning or book learning. That is
Hmm.
just also things that you observe, um, the relationships that you notice around you. It's education in the most general sense.
Hmm. And remember, nature and nurture um, depend on what context, depend on the context,
Mm-hmm.
right? Depend on the context, and
Yeah.
that's it. You don't have to say on context, on what context in which we
Mm.
live. You can
Sure.
just say depend on context, full stop, end of sentence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good
When
point.
Chenzo has an interesting idea. He says,
Mm.
could I say that nature is a natural imprinting? Instead, nurture the possibility of being raised better with a good education. Um, when we talk about imprinting, imprinting refers to the critical period in an animal's life when they develop attachment and develop their own sense of identity. So that is what we would refer to as natural imprinting. Um, so I don't think nature falls into that category. What do you think, Em?
Yeah, I agree with you. Because in a way, imprinting is more about, in a way, more about nurture in the way we
Right.
use it for people, because it's
Mm-hmm.
maybe saying you see someone that you admire or you respect, and you really imitate them. You really connect with that person. Um, that's the way we talk about imprinting for humans, in my
Mm-hmm.
experience, anyway.
Yes, as mine as well. But like we said, Em and I have only done up to A level psychology. But if there's someone out there who has a better has more information, we'd love to hear from you.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And also nurture it's one of the thing is that it's not necessarily better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, nurture is just what you learn by being in the world, by being a human being who observes and participates in what you see. And sometimes, yeah, that may be being raised better because you have more education. Um, but we learn through everything. We are learning in this webinar with all our technical problems. We are learning. You learn all the time, and that's not always about capital E education. Um, yeah, but thank you for that comment. It's a really interesting one. Okay, so we have a case study maybe to talk about for a couple of minutes. So this is an anthropologist called Margaret Mead. So anthropology is like the study of different societies. So a person who studies this is called an anthropologist. And the case study is in Samoa, which is an island, I think, yeah, near Australia, near New Zealand,
Mm-hmm.
in the South Pacific. And she studied the adolescent girl in this culture. Michelle, do you want to read this one?
Sure. In 1925, Margaret Mead journeyed to the South Pacific territory of American Samoa. She sought to discover whether adolescence was a universally traumatic and stressful time due to biological factors, or whether the experience of adolescence depended on one's cultural upbringing. After spending about 9 months observing and interviewing Samoans, as well as administering psychological tests, Mead concluded that adolescence was not a stressful time for girls in Samoa because Samoan cultural patterns were very different from those in the US.
Hmm. Yeah, this is an interesting case study.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we haven't talked about this so far, but gender is a topic that is often mentioned in terms of the nature nurture debate. So are there differences between genders because something is innate, something is
Hmm.
natural, or is it just about the way society encourages people to behave?
Right. She was one of the first, she talks about Margaret Mead, was one of the first anthropologists to study child rearing, to
Mm.
and learning theory within social groups to understand whether it was nature versus nurture. And
Hmm.
she came up with this theory about imprinting, that children learned through imprinting, and she equated imprinting to nurture.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I didn't know that she created that word. That's very interesting.
I don't know if
Um,
she created the word, but she did define it within this context.
hmm, yeah, interesting. Okay. So please let us know, by the way, if there are any words that you are not sure about in this text. So some of you may know sought. So sought is the past tense of to seek, which just means to look for. Just
Mm.
in case anyone is unsure about that. I think most of the other language should be okay, but let us know.
Monica says something interesting. She says, there are people who are able to sing or run very fast and so on.
Mm,
It is a natural predisposition, and nurture is the possibility to learn it.
mm,
Absolutely, Monica, you're bang
yeah,
on.
absolutely.
And the example I like to use is football. If you look at Messi and Ronaldo,
Hmm.
Messi is innately talented. He's a fabulous football player, and his skill levels are fantastic. Ronaldo, on the other hand, isn't as innately talented, in my opinion. Correct me
Hmm.
if I'm wrong, but
I mean,
Ronaldo
I
isn't
yeah.
isn't as talented as Messi, but he's very dedicated. Like his
Hmm.
dedication to his skill is amazing. He practices
Yeah.
every day. Not only does he practice football, he also lifts in order to make. He works on his skill from all angles. So I think
Hmm.
that has enabled him to be a world-renowned football player. Right?
Hmm.
There hasn't really been anyone who is as famous as Ronaldo. Even
Hmm.
people who don't watch football know who he is.
Yeah.
So I think that goes back to Monica's point. You can have skills, and if
Mhm.
you hone those skills, you introduce nurture into your life, and you can reach great heights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at in music, someone like
Mm.
Mozart, who was clearly
Mm.
very naturally talented, um, but he also practiced a lot, and if he hadn't written lots of music as a very young child, he
Hmm.
probably would have gone on to write the amazing pieces later. So for me, I agree with you, Monica. You may have natural talent, but if you don't practice, you will never complete anything. You will never get any further.
Bruno says that this shows the environment in which you live is important. I absolutely agree, Bruno.
Mhm.
It's very important. And if you have the time and you happen to read about Margaret Mead, it also says that her idea to the reason she wanted to study women, like girls, adolescent girls, is because she felt like girls in the US had a lot of pressure around them, how to behave,
Mm.
how not to behave, what to do, what not to do, right? So
Mhm.
she wanted to know that do all girls go through the similar level of stress
Mhm.
during those adolescent years. And when she went to Samoa, she found out that girls there could date casually. They could wear what they wanted. They enjoyed um, a lot of freedom in terms of how to express themselves, and that
Hmm.
did not have an effect on their future. Versus girls in the US at that time did not have the same freedoms. And if they exercised the freedoms they did not have, it would have bad implications, unfair implications
Hmm.
on their future lives.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a very interesting time. In this time period, there was a lot of anthropology in
Mm,
the about 100 years ago. There was a lot of people studying, especially places like this, the South Pacific, which had very little Western influence or
mm,
communication. So it was a very interesting time for studying psychology, studying different societies and the way people lived. So a lot of our ideas about psychology come from this time period.
true, true. Bruno says that in Milan we're all stressed. This is true.
This is true. Yeah.
In Milan, you're either busy or you're stressed, and if you're not, you're doing it wrong.
Mm, yes. And so you can't win.
No, it's a lose lose.
Hmm. Okay, so we maybe can move on to some more general questions. So you can use what we talked about with Margaret Mead if you want to, or any other examples that you can think of. So how can we rationalize similarities between seemingly opposite cultures? And what are some examples there? So seemingly something appears, something seems opposite, even if it may not be in truth, in actuality. Do you think we can rationalize similarities?
Do you think we should? That's the
Mm,
question.
yeah, I'm not sure we should. So I think um, opposite there is a beauty in opposite cultures that we can respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the way, like we said, we rationalize similarities because we think, okay, this is, for example, we rationalize physical similarities, right? We do that very often. Oh, and I've experienced it, which is, for example, I have a cousin who has blue eyes,
Hmm.
right? So very often people say, "Oh, are you guys cousins? How is that possible?" And then I have to rationalize it, and this is rationalizing
Mm,
differences. I have to tell them, no, her great grandparents were from this part of the world, therefore
yeah.
she has the blue eye gene, therefore she's white
Mm.
and she has blue eyes, and I look like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think our global society now, that's very common and shouldn't need much rationalization, really.
Martina says something really, really interesting. She says, I
Mhm.
think that religion is a factor that can explain some similarities or differences. Absolutely. What do you
Mhm.
think, Em?
Yeah, I completely agree. Absolutely. So yeah.
Okay, the second question. Why is this debate important to modern science? What would the implications be if one side had a greater effect on who we are than the other?
Hmm.
Mm,
So this is probably the most important question of all. Um,
absolutely.
it always makes me think of some older case studies about twins who
Mm,
were separated at birth
right.
and forced or naturally did live in completely different uh, societies or families
Hmm.
growing up, and then scientists looked at them later on to see how similar or how different they were, um, which of course is very, very unethical, really. But
Right.
some interesting points.
But they were really unethical back in the
They
day,
were
right?
really
They would
unethical,
conduct some seriously unethical experiments,
really.
stuff that would not fly today at all.
No, I mean, I think this is not really about nature nurture, but the creepiest experiment I remember reading about was there was an experiment in the 1930s where
Hmm.
researchers literally spent time under the beds of university students to see what they talked about when they were alone, which just
Wow.
it's just horrifying to read about, you know?
I think the
It's
most
so unethical.
horrifying social experiment that I've read about would definitely be the Stanford experiment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that's the experiment where they simulated, it was after the World War, and it was called
Mhm,
the Stanford Prison Experiment. And the idea was to understand how so many people who worked as soldiers in the Nazi regime could go ahead and follow their orders. And I think
mhm.
that was a disturbing experiment.
Yeah, really, really was. Yeah, a lot of kind of post-war experiments in the 60s and 70s. Very, very disturbing and very influential.
Hmm.
Yeah,
But
you
also
couldn't miss the lot.
important, right?
So,
Also important,
yeah, very, very important.
because they did answer many burning questions, and they did pave the way for deeper research into cognitive behavior.
Absolutely, yeah. Many of you have probably heard of the obedience experiment that
Mm,
Samuel Milgram did. I think that was also the 60s or 70s,
yep.
where they encouraged people to give someone else an electric shock, or people believed that they were giving increasingly high electric shocks to another person, and they did it. They did it because they were obedient to the person directing them to
Hmm.
do it, which is a very shocking experiment.
Right, but
Uh,
Milgram was a bit more human, I
yes,
believe, because the people who he hired were actors who were faking it, right? But the people who
yes,
were administering the electric shocks did not know about it,
exactly. Yes, yeah.
right? And I think it comes back to our nurture versus nature, right?
Mm.
Nature versus nurture, because it is, I don't think, in our nature to harm one another. At least I hope.
Mm.
But when we have external influences, such as obedience, where you feel you owe someone your allegiance, or you're very
Mhm.
obedient to someone, then your nurture takes over your nature.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Or you have natural instincts which take over everything you have.
Mm.
So you're right, in different situations, they can change. So you have some good comments I'd like to bring in as well. So
Hmm.
Alessandro says we could have a look at their origins to discover their cultural differences. For example, in a surgery, the doctor has to really consider all the possibilities in order to prevent each kind of problem.
Hmm.
Sure. So you maybe look at medical history and things like that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Or people of certain religions who don't want a blood transfusion, for example. That's
Hmm.
is it Jehovah's Witnesses who refuse to
Medical
receive
treatment.
medical treatment? Yeah.
Hmm.
Bruno says religion is the biggest difference between one culture and another. Hmm. I think some cultures can share the same religion though, or
Mm-hmm.
elements of the same religion. So
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but I do have some sympathy with it.
Right, absolutely. I think the same. I think that some cultures have different religions, and but they
Hmm.
share a culture. And I think the best example I could give you is India and Pakistan, where
Hmm.
Pakistan is Muslim, but India is Hindu, and predominantly Hindu and Muslim. But their cultures are incredibly similar, from the food they cook to the clothes they wear, and
Hmm.
even the language is very similar. So sometimes it's religion is religion and culture are interchangeable in some
Hmm.
situations. So again, I think this is just part of the bigger debate, right? That
Definitely,
scientists and psychologists have been trying to answer for years.
yeah, definitely. I'm not sure we're going to answer all
I
of the
don't think so.
today. Bruno also adds another difference is how we view nature. For example, I would never live in a jungle. The environment is important.
I would
Sure,
never live in a jungle either, Bruno. That is
neither would
not my vibe.
no. I know I would hate it. Let alone the environmental impact of it.
um, if you guys have more thoughts, please write to us and let us know.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk about the last question. So the last
Hmm.
question is an imaginary world without differences feasible? Um,
No, no. I for one enjoy being different. I enjoy meeting different people. I think our differences are to be celebrated,
yes,
right? Because the more
I
different
completely
you
agree. Yeah.
are, the more different your environment is. It just expands your worldview.
Yeah, it really does. I just want to mention the meaning of the word feasible. Some of you may be uncertain. So, feasible is like theoretically possible. So, in theory, yeah, well, Martina just asked there. So, feasible, in theory, it's possible. It's not something we would actually do. It's hypothetical, but is it thinkable? And for me, it's just not at all, because differences is what makes the world. What would the world be? We would be in, I don't know, in Munchkin Land or something like that, which sounds horrible.
Munchkin Land, the place where dreams come to die.
I'm sure there are better examples, but for some
No,
reason,
absolutely. Right? Because there, okay, just think about the basics, We wouldn't have sushi and lasagna,
hmm
right?
wow,
I mean,
what would
it
we
doesn't
do?
get deeper than that.
Yeah. And I like Alessandra's comment here. So that world is not feasible because it must be based on empathy.
Mm,
Yeah, I think differences is what allows for empathy. You can't have empathy if everyone is the same, because
absolutely.
that's what empathy is. Empathy is understanding, it is respecting difference. Yeah, thank you. I really like that comment.
Well, thank you guys for joining us and participating.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, or we have run out of time.
Hmm. Yeah, so thank you for all your comments. We apologize again for all the technical issues today.
Yeah.
We had a good discussion anyway.
Hmm.
And have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.